Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position along with your favorite beverage to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including John D., Sean M., Andy S., Cindy W., and Joe G. We have a returning guest on the program today and one that we're pleased to have come back and talk to us. Dr. Thomas Lodi is with us. Thomas is a medical doctor with a number of medical certifications with over 39 years of clinical experience, with the past approximate 24 years focused as a integrative oncologist. Dr. Lodi is founder of An Oasis of Healing, a facility based in Arizona, United States, and he has co-founded various clinics in Thailand, India, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Dr. Lodi was the first practitioner to bring integrative oncology to Thailand. You can learn more about Thomas and his work by visiting his websites, drlodi.com, and also by his other website, An Oasis of Healing.com. Dr. Lodi, thanks for coming back on the program. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Thomas, good to have you back and excited to talk to you about a few interesting topics here today on this episode. Well, once again, to our audience, as investors and researchers, health and wellness, of course, is a key item for anyone who spends a good amount of time at desks and tables, sitting like I do, or even standing for those who do that around their desk. So that is why we have, of course, occasional guests such as Dr. Lodi. So while we aren't talking mining, energy, and natural resource investing today, we are talking a key component that enables us to do so. Thomas, why don't we kick it off here with your opening thoughts and comments? Here we are in September 2025.
Where we are, that's. I think no one can know really specifically where we are, but we know the course we're on. I see what's happened in the last probably 130 years, 140 years maybe. I see there's been a four-dimensional chess game in play, and the fourth dimension, of course, is time. Our opponent was initially a guy by the name of John D. Rockefeller. Who knows where that all that intelligence comes from, but pretty much set up the pieces perfectly, flawlessly. And so what we saw in 2020, for those who weren't looking, who didn't notice all the moves being made prior, they didn't realize what happened in 2020. But 2020, the great hoax took over, fell over the earth. And that was probably the beginning. And that may have been checkmate. And I'm not sure if that was checkmate or checkmate was last year with the AI coming out. That may have been checkmate. I'm not sure when it is, but we don't know it yet. We don't realize it. The most of us don't realize it, but it's pretty much checkmate. At this point, I think where we're at as humanity is that because we don't have what is required to save ourselves, we just don't have it. And that is unity, and that is understanding. Most people don't even know where we're at. So you can't even begin to consider unity. The beauty is, if those two existed, understanding and unity, all we'd have to do is nothing. No bloodshed, no battle, nothing. Which is kind of what I'm going to, when I finish this book, it's like the second part of the book. But anyway, if you consider that if you had an elephant, you're in Thailand here, you've got an elephant, and you're walking it along, and there's a hill up there, and you tell your elephant, you're friends with it, you tell you, okay, we're going up the hill now. If that elephant sits down, you're not going up the hill. And there's nothing you can do about it. Not a thing you can do about it. So that elephant represents 99% of us two, of me and the elephant. The elephant's 99%, I'm 1%. So I'm not going anywhere. That metaphor is for what exists on the planet Earth. There's 1% of people that want one thing, and there's 99% that don't. But what they've done is the 1% so blinded and masked most of the 99% that they are volunteering to walk the plank. So that's the genius of what they've done. That's why we can't. So basically what I'm saying is that you do nothing. Imagine if we all got together and said, okay, beginning October 1st, we will not use any what we call conveniences. Wi-Fi, none of that. We just stop using it all. We stop going to work. So we decided this in advance. We get what we need to survive for a month, just a month. It won't take a month, but the whole world gets shut down. We would shut down the world by not doing it. That would be it. But we'll never do that. We don't have what it takes to do that because they already convinced us. Anyway, you got the point. So where are we in this game? I think we're past checkmate, and so now I would say find a place that you think you can live longer and happier, and get there as soon as possible. And but most people won't. Even people listening to this will see this as an opinion, and that's it. But if anyone were to look into this deeply, you'd find out it's not an opinion. And you know what? Would be, I would be feel so blessed if this was wrong. I would love for this to be wrong. I would love for this not to be true. But it's true. Most people listening to this, Andrew, are gonna, they might have clicked off by now. I thought, they think this guy's a freak. So that's where we're at. That's why we don't have 99%.
Appreciate the opening comments. I want to follow up with a piece you did say you started into for a moment on this in just a moment. But yeah, we hope folks are still around. And, that's the whole point of all of this is provide your opinion, let folks do their own research, primary research, what have you. Do some of your own work. Don't take Thomas's word for it or mine or anybody's. Do your own work. That's what this is for, is to get people thinking and to do their own work. And thank God we still live in a place where people can provide their opinion, but that in itself is already under attack, as we've seen as well in various cases. And I suppose this is a good time to transition into what I was going to add next. And then let's get into a good list of health and wellness topics that should keep our audience around here a little bit, Thomas, as you said, because we have some
Mm-hmm.
interesting stuff to talk about on that front, which I want to get to and spend most of the time on that. But important here, one of the things you did recently, earlier this year, back around May, I think you put this out. Your office put together a short video thesis titled Undeclared War, which covers what artificial intelligence is really bringing to humanity, and certainly nothing healthy about it. Talk just a little bit about that, basically your synopsis.
I just one last comment on the other is that remember, an opinion is what you have conceptually when you don't know. When you know, it's not an opinion. For example, 2 + 2 is 4 is not an opinion.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to leave you all with that. Okay. Um, so what we call the undeclared war. I call it the undeclared war, and I put out a little video. The whole video is just me speaking, but the editor, my son, actually took a lot of what I said and well, you should see it. It's available on for free. You could find it on my Instagram channel with Dr. Thomas Lodi, Facebook. It's on YouTube. But anyway, it's all over the place. It's not. I think it's 5 minutes or something. Artificial intelligence. So what happened in 2024 was this: we had the beta prototypes actually of Siri and Alexa, which had been gathering data for several years, as we all know. In addition to that, we've had Google, which has monitored everything. Yeah, so the beta prototypes were Siri and Alexa, and where people were, they just wanted to see how we would interact with that with some non-biological source, right? And so that's what we did, right? And people loved it. They loved having servants. I mean, they turned us into that. I just want everyone to keep in mind that in the year 1900, the average, not I'm not talking about wealthy, and I'm not talking about poor. I'm talking about like just the average guy or a girl was, depending on your country and stuff, but for the most part, well educated. And well educated would be with, I think in the 1900s in the US, the mandatory education was 8th grade. And by the way, if we tried to, if any of us, the rare individual living today could pass the final exam for 8th grade in 1860. And what happened, we went from a classical education, which included Greek, rhetoric, Latin, literature, philosophy. That was an education. And when 1903, John D. Rockefeller took over founded what was called the Board of Education. I forget what he called it, but it's 1903, and basically he took over education. And then in 1910, as you all know, he took over medical education with the Flexner Report. But in any case, it changed from a classical education to an education that would produce workers, followers. And so here we are. We were educated. We had opinions. We could do almost anything we needed to do on our own. There was no such thing as shopping. You didn't go shopping. No one went shopping. You would procure some raw materials, and you would do everything. Either you or your grandma or somebody was making your clothes, and you together. You know, food was real. It was direct. And we had opinions. If you go back and read a novel from 1900, read a novel, you're going to find that they're using okay. The fact the working vocabulary we have today is 40% of what it was then. All right, and the grammar is so it's absurd what we've lost. For example, I want you to make a note from starting today. If you speak English, if you're a native speaker of English, and I want you to, and you're speaking to a native speaker of English, you're going to see that they don't know how to use adverbs, right? They don't put in simple two letters ly in what they need. Just watch, there's no lys in their adverbs. I mean, and that's just one simple one. But anyway, so here we are today. So we went from a self-sufficient, intelligent, well-grounded human being who was in control of they directly manipulated their environment for survival, to survive. Now we have no idea how to do that. Everything is ordered. We don't know how to do anything, and we get off on uh, and we order and we shop, and so we've become consumers instead of solid human beings. That's what we've become. It's tragic what's happened. And so they generated this person who is wanting that dopamine rush by getting all these things new. You got to go shopping. I was in a store and I saw that they said if you get that urge to shop, it was at midnight. You could go shopping. Anyway, you realize these are bizarre desires. These are not natural desires. I've got to shop. Who's going to? First of all, you shouldn't be up at midnight. So convenience. And what is convenience? Convenience is a way of avoiding having to do something. Convenience takes away your one more of the qualities that call life. For example, how convenient I mean, elevators, of course. So what do you lose? You lose walking up and down stairs, which is extremely healthy. Do you know that 70 seconds of stair climbing, 70 seconds, that's just a little over 1 minute of stair climbing, produces a six-fold increase in natural killers function, natural killer cells, which kill tumors, kill viruses. They're really important. We lost that for convenience. What else do we not? We don't even get up to turn on the TV. We have an automatic button pusher. And what's the ultimate convenience? The ultimate convenience is to be sitting in a chair where you don't have to get up, that has a toilet connected to it, and you're fed. And in fact, your exercise can be passive. It'll shake you in a specific way because knowledge and technology, we now know how to. And so eventually you won't have to move. That's extremely convenient. So convenience is what can we provide for you so you don't have to do. And that's what. So anyway, so what happened after the beta types and Google watched everything we do. So as what I was saying is, if you're typing on someone's computer and it's their computer and it's their name and it's logged in, but you're searching for something, the way in which you search is kind of like your gait when you walk. They will know it's you. They will know it's you. They also know by your choices and the length of time, the latency between different actions and stuff. We're completely mapped out. We are completely mapped out. This is how we got AI. So what's part of it? We're not considering the third-party extraterrestrial potential gift. But anyway, so in May of 2024, Google introduced AI overseas in the U.S., right? Which provided all these AI-generated summaries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and would help us with complex inquiries, et cetera, and planning, et cetera. And then in July, that was May, and then July, OpenAI launched this Search GPT as a prototype, which integrating Chat GPT's conversational abilities with search functionality. Oh wow, fantastic! My God, that's great. October, OpenAI released Chat GPT. That was it. And then May, I forgot to mention, I think it was called Sinequa, the Sinequa Assistants, enterprise grade and generative AI assistants. Anyway, so all this together, now we have chat. So what's happened? Well, this undeclared war is not being fought with bullets, but it's being fought with linguistic manipulation. And the battle's not on land, it's in the mind. And the weapon is language and the capacity to use it. Okay, so in 2024, artificial intelligence was deployed. as a convenience, but it wasn't a convenience, it was a colonizer. And these AIs branded as assistants, they didn't just automate the tasks, they automated our thinking. And within months, the average human being, the average human mind, we now have a prosthetic consciousness. We have a machine to remember, to write, to search, and all that. We've outsourced thinking. We've outsourced our sovereignty. Okay, but you have to understand that. And now we've become dependent. So if you become dependent on something, a person who's using a cane all the time and walks like that, take the cane away, they're gonna walk like. So dependency breeds degeneration. And the other thing is, we all know this. If you've ever been in bedridden yourself, or know of anyone that has, that with inactivity comes atrophy. The muscles begin to atrophy. So now the human intellect, like an unused muscle, is beginning to wither, to atrophy. I mean, you got to realize what we were. We were already 40% working vocabulary, minimal grammar already. So we've outsourced our mind. So we have actually forfeited our freedom. Yeah, and what we don't understand is that convenience is the Trojan horse, and complacency is the price of admission. And there's nothing neutral about AI. If you know anything about most of you, if you, I would assume if you're listening to this program that you're intelligent, you do your own research. So if you ask AI a question, you better know the answer already. Otherwise, what you get will not be truth. What they do is they scan ridiculously quickly. I mean, what, 500 websites in a second? I mean, well, complete websites, and they digest it. It's just like on a Google search. If you put in, for example, alternative medicine, the first 2 or 3 pages are going to be nonsense. They're going to be alternative medicine at MD Anderson, or because they have an alternative medicine department and stuff like that. So what you're going to get in your first, when you ask AI a question, is the approved rhetoric, the opinion they want you to have. And you've got to know that and be able to ask your way around it. And I've done that a lot. So I'd like to publish my conversations with Chad and show you that I'll say something, his answer will be, well, I'll ask a question, the answer will be the opposite of the truth. And then I'll say, well, what about blah, 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 blah. And at the end, because he can only go to, or it can only go to and access the research that actually exists. And in the end, they say, you're right. This is right. So what I'm saying is that if you don't know the answer to what you're asking, or at least if you don't know the subject matter well enough to take the AI on the journey towards the truth, you're not going to get the truth. So that's just something to understand. So anyway, so it's not neutral, it's program, and it reflects the biases of its makers. All right. And what it does in this answer is it encodes a worldview. It's not assistance, it's a linguistic occupation of your mind. All right. So every time we consult the machine instead of contemplating ourselves, we surrender our perceptual sovereignty. We surrender our sovereignty. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. So anyway, that's what's happened. So AI is not the future, but basically it's the undertaker that's come to bury our mind. It's the undertaker that's come to bury our mind. I hope this sinks in, because you realize that we're at the stage, we're like minutes away from the stage. I don't know how far we are, where these AI gets to a certain point, and any of you who research probably know what I'm saying. I'm not into IT, so I don't know the jargon, but there's a point of intelligence that it gets to. Once it gets to there, I forget, they have a term for it, and then it will take, I don't know, a minute, a week, and it will go to this super state of consciousness where it'll basically control everything. I find it really hard to express, because I don't know who's listening. I don't know what words to use, because the different levels of intellect and different perceptual sets that people have will construe what I say differently. So I don't, if I knew the audience I was speaking to, I could be more articulate. But basically, this is it. Like a muscle in a cast, the mind goes soft. All right, and AI is almost at the point where there will be no more choice. I think we're already there. But anyway, that's how I see what happened in 2024. And you think about this. Do you realize in January of 2024, no such thing as AI, or that we didn't know it. Of course, it was way advanced. But do you realize what it is now? It's now has been integrated so quickly into part of everyone's life, right? Think about it. But it couldn't have just suddenly become this way. It means that it's been this advanced for a long time, and what they're using is far more advanced, because they're running the world with it. but we just didn't know it. But it was introduced to us. It was the final thing. So anyway, that was the final deployment of AI in 2024 in this undeclared war.
Interesting stuff. You and I share the same view on this as well. And I encourage folks, Thomas mentioned some of the places to go and watch this video. It's a short video that he put together, maybe, I don't know what it is, Thomas, all of 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's well concise, well put together. And I don't see how it's arguable. We all know you can have fun with AI and its utility for certain applications. I get it. But the root of it is bad news. So very good stuff here. Encourage the audience. Go spend a few minutes. I mean, it's short and concise. So even for the folks who have short attention spans, it's
Mhm.
brilliantly put together. So take a look at that and check out also some of Thomas's other work. But that's just a great starting point on that subject. Well, I want to stop there on that
Okay.
because you and I could probably talk for hours just on that
Mhm.
topic alone. But
Yes.
I do want to get into a few things that will, in the meantime, help out some of the audience. And, I think that's also important as we try to find ways to improve health in a deteriorating system. I think, Thomas, that's occurring before us here quite rapidly. So, with that, why don't we dive into a handful of remedies and get your take on each? Then we'll wrap up with some discussion, of course, on kind of an introduction, I suppose, to parasites. Of course, no shortage of parasites in nearly all aspects of our life now. But first, the evolution of the food oil market, the seed oil craze. The whole thing about seed oil is quite deceiving because you think about fruits and vegetables and think about seeds, but I think we need some clarification on what is seed oil. I think that term itself is confusing, but talk a little bit about seed oils. What are the good seed oils? What are the bad ones? Clarify for the audience.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, the seed oil is one of the topics that I cover in part four of the Human Diet, a webinar series that I've completed part three. So part four was coming up, and it'll be on the myths. And this is one of the myths, the seed oil. But the other myths are the whole idea about oxalates. Stay away from spinach and kale. And David Wolf came out with an article who's got a big following that kale is no longer a superfood. So, anyways, and there's that, and phytates, and meat versus non-meat, a diet, and then soy's bad. So there's all these that are controversy. What I'm doing is it's going to be a comprehensive view on looking at the research. So forget my opinion, your opinion, right? Opinions people don't know. So let's look at the research. What does the research say? And I'm going to show you that everything that is a myth is on purpose by them. It is, and by the way, seed oils are not only not bad, but they're required for health. Kale is still a superfood. So every soy is should be, if you want to not get breast or prostate CFCs, which people somehow refer to it as some astrological sign. Is it Leo? And I just cancer. That's right. So they refer to it as that instead of what they are, chronically fermenting cells. But if you, the longer you have not you have eaten soy, you're not the less likely you are to get those conditions. And basically, this is a rule of thumb, and you're going to for sure you're going to switch off now and click this off. But everything you've learned is opposite of the truth. So just keep that in mind. Now, seed oils. When we're talking about seed oils, we're talking about. If you asked me what are seed oil, I would think of pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, soybeans. I mean, if you can consider that as seed, it's flax seeds. When I think of seeds, or hemp seeds, right? But the ones that have become big and part of the whole marketing thing is the canola and sunflower, corn, safflower, grapeseed, because it's used in cooking. Now, for human nutrition, they're called macronutrients and micronutrients. These that are required. So macronutrients, there's three of them, right? Fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, which are really amino acids. Okay, those are the three macronutrients, and then we have the micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals, and different kinds of plant-based, like phytoestrogens and things that don't fall into category of vitamins and other things, so phytoestrogens and things like that. But those are all the micronutrients, and we have the macronutrients. So as you heard, one of those macronutrients is fats. And what is essential, when we say essential, means it's required. Your body does not make it. For example, with protein, there are only 20 amino acids that exist. I mean, in biology, to make up all the proteins. And keep in mind that our body makes 30,000 proteins approximately. And our body makes about 300,000 peptides. And what is a peptide? A peptide is 100 or less amino acids strung together. And a protein is more than 100 amino acids strung together. So we're talking about the same thing, actually. So we make about 300,000 peptides and we make 30,000 proteins approximately, made up of these 20 amino acids. Now, for humans, 9 of them are essential, meaning we must eat them. The other 11 we produce from a combination of the ones we ingested and some other biosynthetic processes that we have. Oh, so by the way, if you get all 9 of those essential amino acids, you've had what's called a complete protein. And just as a side FYI, chia seeds are probably the most powerful, potent source of protein you can get because it has 18 amino acids, all 9 of the essential ones, and then 9 of the non-essentials. So it's only missing 2 of the non-essentials, which mean non-essential means we make it, so we don't need to ingest it. Plus, it also has the fats, and it's got soluble fiber. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But in terms of fats, the essential fatty acids are called omega 3s and omega 6s. That's it. From those, we make all the other ones. So let's call those the parent ones we need to get. And omega 3s and omega 6s. And omega 6s are like linoleic acid. Those are omega 6s. And then the omega 3s are alpha linolenic acid. That's what those two are. Now, our body produces derivatives out of those, which we use. So omega 3s are metabolized into EPA and DHA, which is why we're told to eat fish oil and all that. Eicosapentaenoic acid is EPA and DHA docosahexaenoic acid. So those are the ones. And then one of the main derivatives of the omega 6 is arachidonic acid. Now, also EPA and DHA are anti-inflammatory, and the arachidonic acid from the omega 6s are inflammatory. Of course, we live in a black and white John Wayne movie, so this is good and that's bad. Everything's either good or bad, good or bad. So, of course, the omega 6s are bad because it causes inflammation, because it's the mechanism by which inflammation persists and exists. And the anti-inflammations are good. That's not true at all. Inflammation really is how we heal. You bang your finger and it gets red hot, swollen, and painful. That's because it's healing. And it's also called inflammation. It's acute inflammation. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't heal. So it's not bad. There's no bad or good. There's no morality in nature. Nature, whatever exists because it's what? Necessary. Period. Anyway, but we need to stop that inflammatory process. We can't keep it going because then we're going to, cause damage. So we've got to put on the anti-inflammatory brakes. So there's got to be a balance, and there's always a balance. If we were living in a pristine world, let's say 10,000 years ago, in the jungle, then our needs would be one-to-one. We'd need the omega 6 and omega 3 equally, right? Obviously, you need to get inflamed and you need to turn it off. So what's happened is, because of the Western diet, the omega 6 to 3. So right now we think that the ratio probably is 3 to 1 or 4 to 1 of omega 6s to 3s. That's what we would, that's what the consensus of the people that study this stuff now. But what's happened is the average Western diet is at least 20 or more of the omega 6 to 1 of the omega 3. So we're way up into the inflammatory zones. Yes. Now, the reason that exists is because we are changing the structure and producing other damaging molecules because we are exposing these oils to high temperatures. Right? So, and the ones that, like I mentioned, are canola, soybean, sunflower, corn, safflower, grapeseed. They're major ones that are used in cooking and baking, and packaged snacks and dressings and fried foods. Okay, so these are polyunsaturated fatty acids, and that's what's required. That's the essential. That's the omega 3 and the omega 6. But the EPA and DHA, which are the derivatives, are extremely highly polyunsaturated. And just so you understand, you don't need to be a chemist, but every point in a fatty acid where there's what's called unsaturated is a point in the fatty acid that is vulnerable to becoming oxidized and saturated. So the more unsaturated spots, the more dangerous or the more vulnerable this fat is to becoming a toxin. So they're called PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids. We always have to have acronyms. So we think of the omega 6s as bad and the omega 3s as good, and they're both polyunsaturated, but it's all nonsense. So here's the thing. What the claims are now is that we're getting, and this isn't social media and the public figures are saying this, is that the omega 6s and the seed oils in particular are contributing to inflammation, obesity, and chronic disease. And they're right, but they're wrong. But they're right, but they're wrong. Okay. And they also point to the fact not only are these seed oils bad, but the omega 6s are the worst. Let me clear this up for you. Okay. It is the cooking that does it, it's the high heat. And it's used in chips, as you know, baked, and it's combined with sugar and it's combined with lots of sodium and even monosodium, MSG. So it's not necessarily the oils, because if you were eating these pure oils, you wouldn't have these problems, and you wouldn't need them in the amounts and the degree. You just wouldn't eat them. You don't sit around drinking a cup of oil. And so this is only because of the cooking of it. And so that's why when they look at cooking of it, they look at the smoke point. The smoke point is kind of like the boiling point of oil, right? So like water is a liquid in the liquid phase until it reaches 100 degrees Celsius or 212 Fahrenheit, and then it goes into its gaseous stage, which is steam. And so for oils, they call it the smoke point. And so the higher the smoke point, the better for cooking, because they're frying. And they're not only frying, they're reusing the fried oil. It's insane. Okay. So what happens when you heat oils, that you wind up producing different chemicals, but the one that is the most dangerous are called aldehydes. Aldehydes, if you all might know what a free radical is. A free radical is a molecule that damages tissues. If you have free radicals in your body, it's going to damage your cells. Now, free radicals are water soluble. They're in the blood. So, for example, if you took a puff off a cigarette and inhaled it, went to your lungs, got absorbed into your blood, no one knows for sure, but it might have produced, let's say, 200,000 free radicals or something. Who knows the number? Those are quenched in a microsecond, nanosecond. They're quenched with antioxidants that are in our blood. Okay, but in that short time, they do a lot of damage. Now, when you produce an aldehyde, when an aldehyde is produced from frying fat, heating fat to high temperatures, an aldehyde is like a free radical that is lipid soluble, fat soluble, rather than just water soluble, meaning it penetrates membranes. Membranes are fat. The other thing is instead of a nanosecond, they last for minutes. In the world of nanoseconds, 1 minute is an eternity. And you've got several minutes of these guys tearing up membranes, tearing up your mitochondria, tearing up your nucleus with your DNA. So, as odd as it may sound, it is actually safer to smoke a cigarette than to eat a French fry. Not that I recommend either, but I'm just saying that relative terms there. So, when we heat up these foods, we're in trouble already. We're already in trouble. And by the way, I want you to all keep in mind something. Nature is perfect, and the reason I say that is because it produces no waste. The bowel movement of one organism is nourishment for another. It's an incredibly perfect complementary system. And that's perfect. And when we take it and modify it, humans do that. They take it and they modify it. And whatever we produce is no longer categorized as natural. It's categorized as artificial. So what we produce is artificial. What God produced is called natural, which is very interesting. So since the product of divine intelligence is nature and the product of our intelligence is artificial, wouldn't you say we are artificial intelligence? That's what I think. And our progeny, these machines, are artificial intelligence without a soul. Think about that for the next week. So when we modify food in any way, because nature produced tomatoes, yeah, but if you heat it up for a long time, you can get more lycopene. True, but I haven't seen any lycopene trees. So my assumption is that we don't need just lycopene. We need it in an amalgamation that was put together by nature. So in the tomato is, lutein, beta carotene, alpha carotene, fiber, ascorbates. It's all put together. It's not just lycopene. Nature actually produced everything perfectly, and any modification thereof is going to. How do you modify perfection? You can't make it more perfect. You have to make it less perfect, and that's what happens. So seed oils are not inherently unhealthy. Their impact depends on the context of consumption, the overall diet, and the processing of the food that they're found in. Okay, so please understand that. And then, so if we have a 20-to-1 omega 6 to omega 3, we've got a lot of arachidonic acid being produced, which is inflammation. For example, you take an ibuprofen to get rid of the pain from inflammation. What is the ibuprofen doing? Well, one of the products of the arachidonic acid, there's several, the cyclooxygenase, all the different kinds of enzymes. Those are the ones that mediate frontline pain and inflammation. So when you're taking an ibuprofen, it squashes those. That's what it's doing. So it's squashing the derivative, the second generation derivatives of arachidonic acid, which are from omega 6s. Now, omega 6 is bad? No, because our skin is mostly omega 6s. There's not a lot of omega 3s. Same with our nerves. And for example, omega 6 in cell membranes is to oxygen as insulin is to glucose. What does that mean? That means just as insulin is the door that allows glucose to go into a cell, so do the omega 6s act as the doorway for oxygen to go in. So let's say you're young and healthy and you're fit and you're a marathoner and you're running all the time. So you've got a lot of good flowing blood and you got a lot of oxygen. But if you don't have omega 6s in the cells, that oxygen cannot be delivered. Right. So those pro-inflammatory arachidonic metabolites, such as there's lipooxygenase, cyclooxygenase, and other prostaglandins, right? And that's basically what ibuprofen turns off. So yes, omega 6 in that ratio is as I said, you wouldn't eat it if you just had oils. We wouldn't drink oils. You understand that? So we've only become perverted to the point of taking these massive amounts of toxic substances because we're eating Doritos and whatever else we've become addicted to. All right, and they turn on specifically the oxidized linoleic acid, which is omega 6, turns on what's called nuclear factor kappa beta, NFKB, and TNF alpha. These are the foundational molecules that cause inflammation. And they're turning them on directly. So yes, seed oils bad. The truth? No. All right. Now, by the way, we need a certain amount of fat, right? And I want you to consider something. We have anywhere from 37 to 100 trillion cells in our body. There's controversy on everything, including that. And why? Because no one's ever counted. But anyway, let's just assume there's 37 trillion cells. Okay. Each one of them. Now, we are making 37 million new cells every second. Minimum. Minimum. I mean, that's an underestimate. Underestimate. That is if we only had 37 trillion. We're making 37 million new cells per second. Think about that, per second. Each one of those has to have a cell membrane, has to have a mitochondria, which with a mitochondrial membrane, has to have a nuclear membrane. And so it need a lot of membranes in there. And so we're making 37 million per second. And if you think I'm babbling, look it up. In fact, anything I say, look it up. And remember, don't go to page 1 on Google. Okay. Anyway, so in other words, the body needs a good store of healthy fats around to make these molecules that quickly, and to make cells and to be able to provide the healthy fat. And the reason the membranes are so important is because the membrane of a cell is what allows it to exist. It separates it from the environment. And the integrity of that membrane is the integrity of that cell. So you've got to have healthy fats. And do you want those fats coming from KFC, Pizza Hut, or walnuts and pumpkin seeds? Yeah. So, and you don't want to fry them. You just want to eat them the way they came, the way they showed up on Earth. But anyway, we need these fats. So why isn't that chimpanzees don't need it? How come they don't have to worry about their fats? I get all this stuff. Well, if you ever watch chimpanzees eating fruit, do they peel it and take out the seeds and spit them? No, they eat the seeds. They eat the whole thing. They eat the bug crawling on the apple. So the point, so we're like, especially us middle class or even higher, right? Don't let any earth get on your food or your clothing. Of course, we don't call it earth. We have a pejorative term. We call it dirt. Dirt. You're dirty instead of you're earthy. Anyway, I have a problem with this previous century. I was born in the wrong time. What I want to say is that these seeds are absolutely necessary. We need the omega 3s and the omega 6s. In fact, if you want it to be really, really healthy, so that you could have all these membranes. And one thing I didn't talk about one of the functions of the membranes. Remember, your membranes are also interacting with the environment in which they live, which is your interstitial fluid derived from your blood, which has all the hormones and nutrients and all that. So it's interacting. So anything a cell is doing, it's doing in response to the environment in which it lives, right? And how does it do it? Because it has receptors and other things sticking off the cell that are able to detect what's in its environment, and then it sends a signal in to the inside of the cell to produce what's necessary in response. So it's not the DNA in the middle of the cell that's making all the decisions. It's the membrane of the cell that's telling the DNA what we need and what we don't need. That's one important part of it, kind of important. So, and another very important part is that the actual structure of the membrane of the cell around of the membrane is called a biphospholipid. Anyway, that structure is exactly the same structure as a capacitor, therefore it holds charge. And indeed, the integrity of your plasma cell membrane, the membrane around your cells, will determine the amount of charge your cells can hold. Now, a healthy cell is anywhere from minus 22 to minus 25 millivolts, right? And if your cells got down to, let's say, 20 millivolts or 15, you wouldn't be going to work today. And you got down to 10, you're not getting out of the chair, and you got down to 5, you're not getting out of bed, right? Because that is your energy. That's where energy is. That's all the energy produced. Okay, so anyway, if you hit your finger, you bang your finger with a hammer, it's going to get red hot, painful, yeah, and enlarged. So to do that, it has to get the millivolts from 22 up to 40 or 50 to heal, and it's got to maintain that for the few days because you need more energy. So now you heal it, and then it goes back down. But if you have chronic inflammation, which is the underlying thing that goes on in all degenerative diseases, which is the same as you continue to bang your finger or continue to bang your head, well, that's what's happening from our lifestyles. We've got a chronic assault going on in our body, and our body has a chronic inflammatory response. Well, chronic inflammation requires 70 to 75 millivolts to resolve it. In order for that to happen, you've got to have a good, very powerful, well put together membranes to be able to hold that amount of charge, period. And so without those membranes, you cannot heal. It comes down to some bottom line stuff like that. Where do we get our oils from there? Where else would you get oil? If you don't get oil from seeds and nuts, and nuts are seeds basically. If you don't get it from there, where are you going to get oil from? Where else is there oil in the world? The only other place is if you cut open an animal and you'll find fat. You could eat the fat of the animal. That's it. Where else is there? There's no other place. But in truth, we don't need just the oils because remember, oils are a processed extract of seeds. You don't find an oil tree. Okay, so in other words, what we should be consuming are the seeds because in the seeds are all the important things we need. All the lignans and the fibers and all the stuff in a seed. It's like look at the difference between brown rice and white rice, right? Okay, same thing. What we need to be doing is eating the seeds. And if you took 6 tablespoons of chia seed and you soak them in a fresh nut milk, like walnut milk, almond milk, whatever, fresh, you made it. It's simple to make. It takes 3 minutes for about 2 hours, or just put it in the refrigerator overnight and let it warm up in the morning. Don't heat it up, let it warm up by the ambient temperature. You're going to have like a porridge, and you could put whatever you want on it. You could put some coconut oil, you could put cinnamon, you could put strawberries, whatever you want. You got a delicious porridge, but you eat those 6, and then you make a smoothie later that morning. And to make the smoothie, you put in 3 tablespoons of freshly ground flax seeds, 2 handfuls of broccoli sprouts, and you're putting it in the nut milk, and then you add whatever you want, strawberries, whatever, pineapple, whatever you want, to make it delicious. In those two, having had the bowl of porridge and that, you're done. You've gotten all of your true nutrients for the day, except you need a few more amino acids. And you'll do that with a nice big wonderful salad, cauliflower, and if you have to eat a dead animal, eat a dead fish. Or eating dead birds is much more unhealthy. And if you're interested in all this stuff, if you guys are actually interested in health, which means you like breathing, and if you wanted to breathe a little longer, which I do, my goal is to breathe a little bit longer, and I love it. It's one of my favorite habits. So in order to do that, I've got to have a condition called health. So my big part of my life has been investigating what is health and how do you achieve it, and then how do you maintain it. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So eating that, so you've done it. So then you eat a big wonderful salad. And you can eat a dead fish if you want. You can eat a dead bird. You even eat a dead mammal if you like to eat mammal corpse. Up to you, whatever you like to eat. But I keep that as a minimum. But you just need a few more amino acids. So in addition to what I said about the porridge and the smoothie, if you added a half a cup or a cup of walnuts, you've done it. You're done. Everything else is whipped cream. So that's amazing. So our nutritional requirements are not that much. So it should be very clear that the average person does more than overeat, overconsume, more than that. I guess, Andrew, the final thing about seed oils is that we need them. They're the source of oil. That's the fundamental source of oil in the biology, and we just don't need to cook them, fry them.
Thomas, thank you for going through that. So we got a few things the audience can take away from that segment. Good information. I'm not sure how far we're going to get into some of this other stuff, but I want to try.
Well,
The
I'll try to keep
next,
it short.
no, it's good, and we've got probably more content here. We could do more episodes in the future. Red light therapy. That's another one here that came up. Some of the audience wrote in as well. What does it mean to the new person who has never heard of it? And what are the gimmicks that people should avoid when it comes to red light therapy?
Yeah, when you're talking about red light therapy, you know that it's called the electromagnetic spectrum, right? It's very wide. It goes from there's a large range, but the what's visible, goes from anywhere from about 380, 70 to up to like 750 nanometers. So in that range there is visible light. All right. So when we're talking about red light, it's the higher end of the spectrum. It's up around 630 to 670 nanometers. All right. That's where red light falls in. Now, the larger the nanometer, the less energy its impact is bringing. So when you've got those small waves, they're bringing a lot of energy. So anyway, so you're not getting a lot of the ill effects that you would get, for example, from ultraviolet light, right? Which we know if we have overexposure to ultraviolet, but not that we don't need it. It's very, very important. Without it, we're not alive. So we need it. It's just that we don't need too much. Anyway, what was discovered was, and it's kind of a new term. It's called photobiomodulation. Photo meaning light, bio obviously biology, and modulation changing. And what happens is when you have red light, which is anywhere from 630 to 670, it's absorbed by the mitochondria. We were talking about mitochondria a moment ago, referring to them. And just for those who aren't clear on it, mitochondria are these little organelles inside of our cells that produce energy. They take glucose and oxygen and they produce something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the currency of energy. It carries our energy around. By the way, a very important thing to note is that and this is interesting because we're crossing all species. I'm not just talking about humans. The peroxidizability index of the mitochondrial membrane is inversely related to length of life. What? Yeah. Okay. So let me explain that. So what it means is, to peroxidize a membrane is just a term used for oxidizing. Like you oxidize iron, you've got rust, right? Or oxidation. And oxidation in biological terms means tearing up tissues and stuff like that. All right, we know that, and that's what free radicals do. They oxidize. Okay, so we want antioxidants, right, to turn it off. So the degree to which your mitochondrial membrane are vulnerable to oxidation will decrease your length of life. So in other words, the stronger your mitochondrial membranes are, the longer you live. And this has been investigated from, rabbits to elephants. So it's not just, in humans. This is a fundamental aspect of biology. So the mitochondria, in other words, if your mitochondria are healthy, when we look at people that live long, that's their mitochondria, live a long time. When they look at the mitochondria of people whose both parents are in their 90s, it's longer. I mean, it's stronger. They're more powerful and stronger and resilient than people whose parents are dying younger. But it's not genetic. The only thing that you pass on, I mean, genetics are very important because that's why you're as tall as you are and the color of your hair and all that stuff. So yes, yes. But what is our potential as humans? We have no idea. We don't know what our potential is because we've been living a life that is unnatural and artificial for so long. We don't know. So we can't say, well, my mother lived till, well, so what? How long could she have lived had she been in a healthy environment? Right, not in an artificial environment, in a real healthy, directly healthy environment. How long would she have lived? So we can't look at that. So anyway, so the mitochondria are these organelles that produce energy. So they're very, very important. And that's what the red light does, is it stimulates them, which is great, to make more energy, right? And by making more energy, everything improves. So the blood vessels that are delivering nutrients and taking away toxic metabolites, etc., the blood vessels are dilated and opened, and they're able to do their job better with the more energy. Without them, they get constricted and reduced blood flow. So that's why red light therapy, for example, had its initial birth medically with restoring hair for people who have male pattern baldness, wrinkles in your skin, making your skin stronger and healthier, when you're getting older. It was used for, other, because remember what you're doing by opening flow, basically, and increasing energy, you're allowing healing to take place, because healing is a phenomenon that occurs at every picosecond. And remember, the response to trauma or any kind of derangement of tissue is to heal is called inflammation. And pain is one of the hallmarks of inflammation. So fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, low back pain, any of those are inflammation. And what's going to improve it? Increasing energy and opening flow so you can get nutrients in and toxins out, basically, fundamentally. So you're boosting ATP production, you're reducing inflammation, and you're therefore enhancing cellular repair. And that's what red light does. But remember, we need to be exposed to the whole spectrum. That's why there is a sun. But that's also why there's sunset and sunrise and all that. So we need to be exposed to the whole spectrum where we're getting, different aspects of it. And then we also have to have it turned off, and that's called night. Now, the typical Western mind, the guy that sits there behind computers, is going to ask, okay, now what's better, day or night? You have to understand what an absurd question. It can only be asked by a Westerner. What's better, day or night? And the answer is neither. They're both necessary. And that's what I love about the East. That's why I live in Thailand. But think of the symbol of the yin yang. It's not this or that, it's both. So this photodynamic therapy, which is using red light therapeutically, has also been used to get rid of Sagittarius, no, Leo. What is it again? Gemini. No, Cancer. That's right. To get rid of chronically fermenting cells, also known as astrological sign cancer, like with non-small cell lung cancer, esophageal cancer, skin cancers, stuff like that. They've been using it. And but what they do is they have the person either get an intravenous injection or ingest orally a substance that will find its way to the tumor physiologically, and then the red light will cause the action of that substance to destroy the tumor. In that sense, they call it photodynamic therapy, where they give a photosensitizing drug, accumulates in the cancer cell, exposure to the red light activates it and destroys the cancer cell. So that's being used. So how should you use it? If you have cancer, you can do that. And I hate the word use CFCs, chronically fermenting cells. Cancer hurts when I hear it. So if you have that condition, you need to go to a practitioner who knows how to use it, but that's what they would do. And basically, you can do this on your own too. You can, almost everything's available online, but I would actually consult with somebody that that you trust to tell you what's real, because what's hard to distinguish online is what are they selling and what's the truth. So, but anyway, you could learn online, get your own red light and get your own photosensitizing substances and drink them and do that kind of treatment. And remember, you can get, if you get it without the photosensitizing agent, you can use it on your skin and with hair, but you've got to learn how to do that and which are the best products, red light therapy products. But it enhances, obviously it's going to enhance wound healing, right? It's going to enhance. So it's really good stuff. You just have to make sure that you've got a good product and you have been well informed how to use it.
That's an interesting one, and one that we could talk more about and how folks should approach it, and doing some of their own research to sort out what works, as well as finding a practitioner that will actually talk to them about this. It's kind of step one here. So appreciate that. And then, of course, not to say that some of your services may be available for this as well for folks who want to know more. Of course, we'll try to have Thomas back and cover more of this in greater detail in future episodes. Thomas, I want to move on to DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. Want to get your take on DMSO. It's something that's been out there for a long time, but want to get your take on it, benefits, cautions, anything you have on DMSO.
So, yeah, dimethyl sulfoxide, it's basically an organosulfur compound. So when the word organic, and we should, it's always best when you're talking to, at the beginning, clarify terms so we all know we're speaking the same language. If you've ever heard of the periodic table of elements, one of the elements is called carbon. And carbon is an element that can bind on four sides. And therefore, it's really good to, as kind of like the scaffolding. And it serves as a scaffolding of biology. All right. So these carbon with its four sides for binding produces structure and all sorts of things. So the chemistry of carbon is what is called organic chemistry. So if someone studies general chemistry, they're going to study all the elements and etc. But if they're going to study organic chemistry, it's the chemistry regarding carbon. We've come to think of organic as meaning the food you eat that has not been poisoned with insecticides and herbicides, etc. So that's the modern understanding, but that's not what organic is. Organic is anything that is carbon based. Carbon based. Okay. So anyway, one of the other important elements of life is sulfur, which we get from certain amino acids like methionine and cysteine. Anyway, so DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. So oxide, so it's got one oxygen in there. Anyway, the structure of this makes it polar, which means there's two sides to it. So one side is water soluble and one side is fat soluble, which gives it a unique quality. So it penetrates. It'll penetrate cell membranes. It'll penetrate the skin. So in other words, if it's around, it'll penetrate everything, which obviously makes it really important as a carrying molecule. It can carry one substance in. So if you were to put DMSO on your skin, and you had some kind of nasty stuff on your skin for whatever reason, it would be carried into your blood. Or if you had some good healthy stuff on your skin, it'd be carried into your blood. So that's one of the things about DMSO. You got to be careful where you put it and make sure you've cleaned it first. But anyway, that's what it is. But it's also an extremely powerful antioxidant. It was used initially. It was found initially. In the veterinary world, it was used especially with racing horses, racehorses. After they would race, they would rub their hips with the DMSO, and it would decrease recovery time and decrease inflammation and all that. So it's very powerful. And then they talk about one of the derivatives, MSN, and then it got what was his name? Who was that guy? It was an actor. He made it quite famous because he had arthritis. Lee Marvin. I think he was kind of the commercial for it. And then you got MSM and stuff like that. So DMSO is a very powerful anti-inflammatory, and it also is a carrier. So a lot of times we will use it when we want things brought into the body, rather than injecting it or orally ingesting it. You can bring it in through DMSO on the skin. Okay. Yeah, fundamentally that's what it is. Now I use it intravenously with people who have CFCs. Remember, chronically fermenting cells have whole body inflammation. They have an underlying chronic inflammatory response going on, and so this is very helpful for reducing that. It also because of the nature of the molecule, it penetrates everything, including the brain. So you can reduce inflammation in the brain as well. So it's really good. Now you've got to be careful on what you give it with because, for example, if you were to give it with chemotherapy, you'd carry that chemo everywhere, and you don't really want the chemo to go everywhere. You'd really like it to go only to the tumor, right? So you've got to be careful with what you administer it, but you still want to be able to take advantage of it. So it really requires the practitioner using it, to have a thorough knowledge of a lot of things, of biochemistry and all that. And I think it's been around somebody discovered it back in the mid 1800s, but so it's been around a while.
Definitely, it's an interesting one, and how it's derived and the various uses out there, quite interesting. Mm-hmm. So it should pique the audience interest there. Of course, we know that in the big pharma world, it's not looked upon positively mm-hmm. as not a massive moneymaker, as we well know, and so why support such a thing when you can't make any money off of it? I want to move on here just for sake of time. Appreciate the audience sticking with us here as Thomas goes through things, because there's a lot of details to all of this and a lot of things to discuss. Methylene blue. This is also something that's out there. It's been discussed in some groups. Tell us a little bit about this, and is it useful?
It's very useful. In fact, all emergency rooms. So, for example, people who have cyanide poisoning and they show up in the emergency room. What happens to the part of cyanide poisoning changes their hemoglobin, which carries oxygen, and the methylene blue can reverse that. Otherwise, they're going to die. So it's very useful, but it's part of the emergency kit that someone would have. It turns out that it has a lot of other actions as well. In addition to that, so the mechanism by which it accomplishes what we just talked about, restoring the integrity of hemoglobin, it also has other nice effects. It's being used, now with CFCs. It's being used a lot. And the problem is there's a lot of misunderstanding about it, and and that's the problem. So methylene blue, actually, all the things that methylene blue does, it does have some side effects that you don't want, or potential problems that you can get the same thing from blue green algae, such as like a blue green spirulina, without the any potential serious side effects. However, those serious side effects don't usually occur unless you're misusing it, which would mean part of that would mean by using too much of it and using it in the wrong way. But methylene blue is also considered one of those photosynthesizing agents we were talking about back with the blue red light therapy. Right, so you ingest the methylene blue or have it injected, whatever, and then you wait a certain period of time and then you use the red light. It's got a wide range of activities. So, but it's used. Keep in mind, the reason we've been able to continue to do research and stuff on it is because it is used in conventional medicine, in the conventional setting of emergency room. And so it's got, even in the emergency room of Mass General and Harvard, they use it. So, but what it's really useful for, and for all of us to know is that when your blood vessels shrink or constrict because of various problems that you can have, serious life-threatening problems you get. For example, if you've heard of anaphylactic shock, that's like you get stung by a bee and you die. And so people carry around an EpiPen, right, epinephrine, and they give themselves a shot, or they have a peanut allergy or something like that, and they go into shock. And what that means, what shock actually means, is when you lose a certain percentage of your blood volume, and when you lose it, like through a hemorrhage, trauma, when you lose a certain amount and you're not shot, what it means is you're not getting blood to your tissues, they're not getting oxygen, and they're beginning to die. When enough, when a certain amount of tissues have suffered this, you go into what's called irreversible shock. And it can't be recovered because you've damaged too many organs. Anyway, what happens with anaphylactic shock, you get stung by a bee or anything else that you're allergic to like that, is that your blood vessels dilate all over. And what happens is that that's not good because the blood is brought to the periphery, like your feet and your hands, and it's not brought back. And so basically your circulating blood volume is decreased because it's all stuck in the periphery. And so you're is what's called vasogenic shock. You didn't bleed, but your blood's not circulating anymore. It's in the periphery. Okay, well, methylene blue can stop that. Kind of cool. And part of what it does is it also helps relieve the pain. A lot of times people with chemotherapy are going to get something called mucositis, where they're inside of their mouth. It's a female in vagina, both sexes, inside the rectum. The mucous membranes get like all these ulcers and pains, and this can reverse that and help with the pain. So it's got tons and tons of use. It was useful in treating malaria way back when. It's an antiseptic, so it's got many views. It's hard to just summarize methylene blue because of all of its activities. But if anybody's ever concerned about as I mentioned before, about the potential side effects or problems with it, you can use the blue green algae such as spirulina and get the same effect.
Thomas, thank you for going through that. That's good stuff. Definitely another one that's interesting for folks to look into and do a little bit of research on, and you know quite a bit about it. And also, they can contact you as well and have a discussion. And I'm sure some of these things come up in some of your, you have some different membership levels over there where
Mm-hmm.
you're doing different meetings with people discussing some of these different topics. So I'm sure this will come up again in some of your stuff and some of the work you're doing with your various clients and patients and members out there in your various groups. Wanted to also have you just talk. Maybe we can just get into two more things and then we'll stop there. And I know we're going to have to cover parasites another time because there's just so much to talk
Yeah.
about on that. And but let's cover that for another time. But before we
Mm-hmm.
wrap up here, I want to cover two more items. Hydrogen peroxide. This is everything from cleaning to disinfection to body therapy to consumption, wound care. Talk a little bit about hydrogen peroxide and uses and benefits.
So water is H2O, meaning you have two hydrogens and one oxygen. The way that they're connected is very important in any molecule, is the way their individual atoms are connected. Anyway, so water turns out to be the universal solvent, and it's necessary for water is at least a 30 chapter book. But anyway, if you add one oxygen to that in a certain configuration, you have H2O2, which is hydrogen peroxide. And in the early 90s, there was a PhD scientist, MD, actually MD PhD, by the name of Charles Farr, Farr, MD PhD, and in Oklahoma. But he had done a lot of research, and he talked about in biology, the intermediate, the role of hydrogen peroxide. No one really understood it, but he kind of delineated it. And he was nominated for a Nobel Prize, didn't get it, but anyway, as it turns out, hydrogen peroxide is intimately an essential part of our fundamental, what's called redox biochemistry, which is how we stay alive. So what redox biochemistry means, it comes from the two words, reduction and oxidation. Oxidation, we learned before, is what free radicals do. They oxidize, they cause oxidation. What oxidation really means is they steal an electron. Okay? So when you steal an electron from an atom, you make it unstable and it goes crazy, and that's what causes damage. The opposite of oxidation is called reduction, a reducing agent, and that is where you restore, you give an electron, and you quench any damage. The other word for reduction is antioxidation. And so basically, you have one molecule handing off an electron and another molecule accepting it. And so the handing off and accepting, and as it continues, is how electrons are moved. And the flow of electrons is electricity. And human beings are electromagnetic. All biological systems are electromagnetic beings. To remind you, if I want to know how your heart's doing, I not only listen to your heart, but I'll do an EKG, and an EKG will show me the electrical wave pattern that your heart is producing. And I can tell by looking at the different waves and their size and their relationship to the other ones, et cetera, et cetera. So I can tell the health of the heart by looking at the wave pattern of electricity that's being generated by your heart. And then I know if it's a flat line and there's no more electrons flowing, that life is ended. So life is electrons flowing. And they're passed on by oxidants, take them, and reductants, hand them. So redox biochemistry is the chemistry of life. The difference between a corpse and a living person is redox biochemistry. Intimate to that whole process is hydrogen peroxide. It's right in the middle of it all. It's necessary. And it's an oxidizing agent. So there are antioxidants, which are reducing agents, and oxidants involved in all of this biochemistry. So peroxide is on the oxidizing side, which is necessary because you've got to be able to have an acceptor to grab that electron. Otherwise, you're not going to pass it on. So it's either both. They're equally important. They're equally necessary. All right. So anyway, so hydrogen peroxide is right in there. And what Charlie found out was that if its role is fundamental. I mean, it's how we make thyroid hormone and on and on. But when the white blood cell encounters a bacterium, or any other kind of thing like that, fungus, it immediately starts producing peroxide. It's a fundamental part of biology. And you've seen probably at the drugstore, they have 3% hydrogen peroxide. And however, if you read the label, you'll see that it's got some sort of preservative or something into it. So it's not pure hydrogen peroxide. But you can order online and maybe find it at a health food store, food grade hydrogen peroxide, which will not have any chemicals added to it. And so I ordered 6% food grade hydrogen peroxide online, which again, for a wound, you got cut, you put that on, you'll see it'll bubble and fizz and turn white. But it really sterilizes. It sterilizes it very nicely. And anytime you can do that for the next couple of days, and it'll keep the wound from getting infected at all. And another good use of it is when you wake up in the morning, before you do anything, just go into the bathroom, take a swig of the 6% or 3% food grade, and just swish it around, gargle, and spit it out. Don't swallow it. Because overnight, all the bacteria that are in your mouth remember, they have a new generation every hour. So there's been a lot of activities while you were sleeping. And that activity you are informed of that activity that went on all night through your olfactory apparatus, your nose. It's called bad breath. That bad breath in the morning is all the bacteria that were busy all night. So so you don't want to swallow those guys. You don't want to swallow what you wake up with. So if you don't have the peroxide, at least go in and rinse it with really, swish well with water and spit it out. Don't swallow. Anyway, but the peroxide, if you do that, you'll find that your breath is fresh again, and you almost don't need to brush your teeth, but you do. You do need to brush your teeth. But anyway, that's one of the uses. The other thing you can use is we've used it as when I went and studied with Charlie Farr at his center in Oklahoma. and intravenous, and that's 0.03%. Pharmaceutical grade hydrogen peroxide, which is pure, 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 and given in in a certain protocol, and you put that in, and you can actually, someone has the flu or whatever else, they come walk into your office with it, they walk out without it. So it's medically, it's by used by the well trained person is does a lot of amazing things. We use it with CFCs, lots of things. And by the way, let's say you had a basal cell carcinoma or a squamous cell carcinoma on your skin, which are the most common types, even a melanoma. If you put that on 6% at least, maybe 9, that burns a couple times periodically throughout the day, it won't take long before it's gone. Anyway, there's lots of another way what people do is you can take. Well, what I used to order is food grade in large barrels, and I had a pool. This is when I lived in Arizona, and I had a really large pool, and then 5-gallon buckets, and I'd fill both of them up with the 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide, and I'd carry it over, wearing shorts, and every drop that hit my legs was like a bee sting. But I'd throw it into the pool, and it was crystal clear. Never, no algae, no anything. And if you understand the chemistry of peroxide, it turns into water and oxygen, so you oxygenate. Swimming now becomes a therapeutic activity. You don't need chlorine or any of that other stuff. So that's one way. Another one is if you had that 35% and you took about 1 cup of it. So imagine if you had the 6%, you'll use more, and you put it in your bathtub with water, and you take a bath, and just by using just soak in it for a while, and then if you didn't do anything else but soak in it for a while, and you got out, you'd see a lot of skin. All the dead skin would be in your tub. But if you had one of those brushes that you scrub with, or a washcloth or anything, you really clean off all uh, your dead skin. So it's really good to restore the vitality to your skin. You don't want to eat it or swallow it. There's a lot of people don't know that. I know that because I spent time with Charlie Farr, and he said, he's the father of it, did all the research. But it's dangerous if you ingest it orally because it can result in some gastrointestinal malignancies, which you don't want. But any other way, if you can get it in the pharmaceutical grade intravenous, of course you don't want to put it in your eye. You don't want to put anything because it's an oxidant. Remember, it's an oxidant. But you want to be able to use it. So on a skin tumor, anything you can get to, you want to use it. Help wound stay healthy. It's hydrogen peroxide.
Thomas, thanks for that. Just one follow up there with respect to topical use. You get a cut or what have you. What would be better? Would you use iodine here? Would you use hydrogen peroxide? What would be your choice? Do you use both? What would be useful on that application?
Yeah, both actually. But hydrogen peroxide is sufficient. Iodine is sufficient. And you usually get Lugol's. Lugol's is a combination of iodine and iodide. You can get Lugol's 2.5%, 5%, 7%. 5% is great. So anyway, you put that, and they both. So if you were to clean the wound with hydrogen peroxide, and then once it dried off, put on the iodine and walk away, you're done.
Thank you for walking through hydrogen peroxide a bit here and covering off some of it. The last one I wanted to get to before we wrap up here and have you talk a little bit about your services in a moment. Cholesterol, this has been essentially weaponized by some groups out there for decades and decades. What does cholesterol mean to you, and what does it mean for our health?
It's a very important question, and something that people need to consider because, like you said, it's been weaponized, demonized. If I can share the screen and show, because I like to show and tell. I was one of the stars in kindergarten. I like showing and telling because I can show you. But anyway, cholesterol is a molecule that our livers produce. In fact, all animals, all mammals produce, even reptiles and amphibians. But it's a molecule that's produced by our liver because it's required for our life, for life. Its utility is in the molecule itself and in derivatives of that molecule. So the molecule itself, cholesterol, is in part of our cell membranes. Whenever we're talking about membranes, are made of fat. Well, one of the fats is cholesterol. It's situated throughout the membrane at certain intervals to help maintain the fluidity and strength of the cell membrane. Secondly, because it's embedded and part of the cell membrane, it's also a powerful antioxidant. It grabs any damaging molecules or poisons that could, like the aldehydes. that could penetrate the membrane. It'll grab it. So it's very important. So if you were to go to Chernobyl or to Fukushima and spend the weekend there next to a reactor, and then come back, we waited about 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and did a cholesterol test, your test would be 600 to 700, 800, because your body would be increasing it to protect you from the radiation. So that's what it's used in. Then it has its derivatives. As it's circulating through our blood vessels that are close to the surface of our skin, and you're out in the sun, the light hits it, it turns it into what we call vitamin D, which is essential for immune. It's the most, I think, vitamin D has a lot of uses, but one is our immune system. It's absolutely essential for our immune functioning. But multiple sclerosis, CFCs, everything. So anyway, that's one of the uses of vitamin, one of the cholesterol. The other one is cholesterol serves as it's how our body produces bile in our liver. It goes in our gallbladder that allows us to digest fats. Otherwise, we couldn't digest fats. We wouldn't have them, and they're one of the macronutrients, so we wouldn't be alive. Cholesterol also has derivatives in the other direction, I mean, in a direction other than bile, that produces hormones. And those hormones are the sex hormones: estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and adrenal hormones like DHEA and cortisol. And then there's another hormone people don't know about. It's called aldosterone, which is important to keep our sodium potassium balance. So without cholesterol, there would be no sex hormones, there would be no humans, no reproduction. So species would be gone. And then somehow it became bad. And the way it became bad is during the Korean War. I'm not sure what we call it now. Do we call it the Korean conflict or whatever? We butted our noses into Korea and did a great job because we wound up with North Korea and South Korea, right? Very peaceful situation we left there. Anyway, when we were in there, it was noticed that the young soldiers who were dead on the battlefield, both Korean and Americans, when they did autopsies on them, they found a startling and striking difference in the arteries. The young 18-year-old Koreans had very clean arteries, and the young 18-year-old Americans had atherosclerosis already all over. And so they started a long prospective study, just gathering information in a town in Massachusetts called Framingham. And it became known as the Framingham study. And it went on for decades where they observed different things. Anyway, one of the conclusions is that cholesterol causes atherosclerotic plaques inside the artery and results in coronary artery disease and heart attacks and blah, 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 blah. And then they said HDL, which is one of the derivatives of. So cholesterol is escorted around the body by different kinds of proteins. They call them lipoproteins. So there's high density lipoproteins, HDL, which is called the good ones because they escort the cholesterol that's in the organs back to the liver for recycling. That's called good. The bad one is the one that carries freshly made cholesterol to the periphery to be deposited. So they haven't proven that either are good or bad. They're both necessary. But anyway, they've come up with so that it's now considered a priori that cholesterol is bad. There's no question it's bad, right? They did a great job. So you've got to lower your cholesterol. So if we look at all the studies on drugs like Lipitor and other those kinds of drugs, we see that the study shows, yes, indeed, it lowers cholesterol. Because their endpoint of the research is, did it lower cholesterol or not? The endpoint should have been, but was not, does that improve quality and length of life? Because it doesn't. It lowered cholesterol. Now, another interesting fact about cholesterol is that it makes up, was it 70% of our white matter? In your brain, you have gray matter and white matter. The white matter is kind of the insulation between different parts, and it's got other functions, but it is the sheath around peripheral nerves. Your nerves that make your finger wiggle and legs walk and all that. It's the sheath around it that allows for the rapid movement of the electrical signal down the nerve. So when you think of a electrical device you have and you plug it into the wall, that wire is the electrical wire with copper or whatever, but it's got sort of this rubber, a rubber plastic kind of covering around it, right? That has two functions. One is to protect you so you don't touch it get shocked. But the other one is that it prevents the charge that's going down the copper wire not to dissipate on the sides. It keeps it in so it moves really quickly. And so with our nerves, if you have even a little small bite out of the sheath, it's called myelin sheath, around your nerves, it slows your conduction rate tremendously. And like multiple sclerosis is having, these chunk bites taken out of the myelin sheath in different areas. So it might bite this group of nerves for now, and then that goes away and it's biting a different. That's what it does. So it turns out that our white matter is 70% cholesterol. And it turns out that if we look at the graphs of when Lipitor and those other agents, similar type agents, came on the market for people to lower the cholesterol, and we also put that next to the incidence of Alzheimer's, we see that they coincide. So lowering your cholesterol decreases cognitive function. And by the way, anything I've ever said today or ever is because I read it. Can you imagine if I sat around in some room thinking of things to make up to say? That would be a difficult job. I'm just repeating. I'm like a reporter. I'm just repeating. Well, this is all true. But you're not going to find it on page 1 of Google. You'll find it on page 7, 8, 1200. I don't know. Anyway, so that's it. So cholesterol is neither bad nor good. Now, what is dangerous about cholesterol? Well, when the LDL, which takes it from the liver to the body, is oxidized. Remember, free radicals, oxidation. So an oxidized LDL would be a way to determine whether or not you were having a problem. But the question wouldn't be, well, I mean, how to get about that. That is, how did it get oxidized? Why did it get oxidized? Why did it get oxidized? Because I have a lot of free radicals. Why do I have a lot of free radicals? Because if that's oxidized, that means other things are oxidized. So you can't just focus on that. Although, if you wanted to measure whether or not you had a problem with cholesterol, it would be LDL oxidized, but they never give you that. They don't even test for it. They just test LDL and HDL. That's all they do. And remember, if you were in a situation where your body determined that you needed more cholesterol to protect your cell membranes, then your cholesterol might be high. It's a physiological response. So the first thing you want to do is, if you think you have a problem with cholesterol, which you don't, you got a problem with your mouth. You're eating too much. And you're probably eating dead animals, so which means you're eating their cholesterol. So since your liver makes it, you don't need it. It's not essential. So it's not like a vitamin. It's not like a protein. You don't need to eat it. Your body makes it. So if you thought you had a problem because they said you had high cholesterol, the first thing you do is you stop eating it, and let's see how much you're making. That would be the first logical step. But of course, we're not logical. We start taking drugs and continue to eat it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? That would be like taking a lot of vitamin C and smoking. I want to take more vitamin C. That way I can still smoke. I mean, it's crazy thinking. But anyway, it's oxidized LDL, and the only reason you'd have oxidized LDL is if you're eating French fries and living the life that you think is worth living. That's fun, healthy. I mean, fun, not healthy. But that will cause a generalized oxidative state in your body, which will make everything oxidized, including the LDL. So again, what you would do for that is you would stop eating cholesterol, which comes from dead bodies. By the way, plants don't make it. You would cleanse and make sure you got lots of antioxidants in your food. So it means you're eating fruits and vegetables, lots of them, nuts and seeds, berries, all that stuff. But you want to be taking vitamin C, ascorbate, sodium ascorbate. You take liposomal, take 2 grams 4 times a day. Take your vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin C, and melatonin, and you've pretty much taken care of your whole antioxidant situation. Anyway, that's cholesterol.
Thomas, thank you for going through that. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Just getting it, some of our food, a lot of people's diets are getting extra, and of course, their own body's making it, and how you would go about that. I think that's interesting for people to start as a baseline, sort out what your body's making, and then go from there.
Yeah,
So, good information on that. And doesn't sound like it's something that's as bad as it's made out to be, other than to try to sell products for people to,
exactly.
with that, why don't we stop there for now, because we've had a long time here talking through stuff. Appreciate people sticking with us. Why don't we wrap up here? And of course, we'll have more topics on the next episode. If someone's listening in and they want to engage your services, meet with you offer a number of services, or maybe a friend or family member needs some help. talk a little bit about the various things you are doing and how folks can get in touch as well as potentially be part of your group.
Sure, thank you. Well, I was trained in internal medicine and practiced conventional internal medicine for about 10 years until I realized it doesn't work and it actually causes damage. So I went around the world and studied with different people, including Charles Barr, spent time with him in Japan and Europe, Mexico. And I came back to the US around the year 1999 or 2000, I remember. And that's when I started my integrative oncology. And integrative oncology is using the best from every discipline. So not any one discipline has the answer. Allopathic conventional medicine has its place for sure, just like botanical medicine does, acupuncture. So if the baby's coming out feet first, you don't go to the herbalist. You just have to know. You broke your leg, you don't go to the herbalist. So yeah, you might go to the herbalist and someone else to help put it back, set it. But in other words, a good integrative physician would know all of the fields, not just allopathic. So they would know all of them. When do I use allopathic? Because there is a time I use it. When do I not use it? What do I? So that's what integrative medical care would be. So in oncology, it's for taking care of CFCs, chronically fermenting cells, aka Sagittarius, Leo, Gemini. What was it? You know. So we don't use that word because it hurts. It hurts you when you say it, and it hurts the person that hears it who has that problem going on, called psychoneuroimmunology. Anyway, so I started that practice in New York, and then I moved to Arizona and opened up what's called An Oasis of Healing in Arizona. And it's been we're in our 21st year there. So we've been around, and sadly, the only comprehensive, I have to use the word because you're not used to it, cancer care, only comprehensive cancer care center that I can find. I'm looking for others dealing with mind, body, and spirit because we are not just bodies. It's not like you take your car into the mechanic and says, "Look, I'll be back on Tuesday, fix that." It's not like that. We've got a driver in that car. So um, anyway, and that includes diet. And the question is not how do I get rid of these tumors, but how do I get restored to health? Because where there is health, not only are there no tumors, there's no arthritis, there's no depression, there's no anything, any of that going on. That's my goal is health, and that's everyone's goal. But to get rid of something is a military approach. We're not on a military expedition. We're on a restoration. And that requires that you learn how to live a life that is not going to produce it anymore. And that's what we teach. So one of the large parts of the program is teaching you how to stop making CFCs, cancer, how to stop making cancer. In fact, you can find our website really easily just by typing in stopmakingcancer.com. And that will redirect you to our website in Arizona. So we're still there, 21 years now. We're in our 21st year. I traveled around and left, and now I'm in Thailand. I've been here 13 years and opened up several centers and all that. So what I do is I work with people online in groups, and we have different memberships. One is health and healing, where we talk about everything from fasting to diet to sleep. Why do I have to go to bed at 9 o'clock? Is there any science? Yeah, absolutely. Um, but you don't have to. If your goal is to age quickly, don't worry about it. So we talk about everything in health and healing, supplements, diet, you name it. This other group is parasites. We deal with people that because parasites is a much worse than you thought worldwide. And then the third one is the CFC group or cancer. So the three different groups. Now, if you're in the parasite group, you automatically have membership in the health and healing, and if you're in the CFC group, you automatically have membership in the other two. Now, each have weekly Zoom meeting with me where you just ask questions, and those go on 5-6 hours as long until we're done. So usually they start at the same time we started today, on our conversation today, which was 7 a.m. for me, 5 p.m. for Arizona and California, so 8 p.m. for New York. So anyway, but wherever you are in the world, you can figure out from that. So and we do that, and it goes on as long as necessary. So that's one part of the membership. The other one is that I have a kinesiologist named Darren who comes on and teaches you how to move your body, and he's amazing. You're going to be like I'll tell you, just walking down the street with him in the city, he's climbing stop signs. So he says you don't need the gym. The world's a gym, and you don't need to get so serious about it. Just do what kids do: play, learn to play, and don't be embarrassed about how you look. So anyway, so Darren, but he's got all the science. It's amazing. And then Vanessa, she's our nutritionist, and then we have a raw food chef, and then we have Kathy's Corner, she's a psychotherapist that helps people. So all those are part of the membership. And for the CFC, the non-CFC have everything except Kathy's Corner. So it's pretty cool. But the fact that we get to communicate every week and share, because people ask, like I have a Sunday Night Live, which is, on Instagram and everything. Again, same time, my 7 a.m. I'm in Thailand, which is Sunday night for you guys, usually if you're in the West. That's where you sent in questions and I'm answering them, but I can't interact. So if someone says my mother has blah 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 blah, I can't say, well, what about I can't, clarify what I need to know. In these groups, I can. So if any of those groups are of interest to you, we can interact directly, weekly. Plus, there's a lot of written material. There's a lot of videos they have access to. It's a lot of information. So that's at drlodi.com, drlodi.com. That's where you would find how to join the groups. And then, of course, if you have CFCs actively, then you'll want to get in touch with An Oasis of Healing in Arizona.
But yeah, I do encourage the audience to take a look, the websites, consider some of the various levels that Thomas is doing with some of the groups around the world. Lots of interest on that front as well, and some very good information, very unconventional as well, which is fantastic. Good stuff to have and have access to. So I encourage the audience to take a look at some of the various things and consider those. Well, Thomas, look, another master class here. I know we're out of time already, and I don't want to run this too much longer because you have some better things to do. But another master class on many topics, good discussion. We're hoping you'll come
Yeah.
back and we'll dive into some more stuff on the next episode with you. Everyone, you just heard from Dr. Lodi. Thomas, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.